church. Excuse me. And as I get everything prepared here and set up, get my microphone working, if you would like to turn to Luke chapter 2, it is, of course, the familiar Christmas story. But I have maybe a sermon that will make you think about some things not so familiar. I want to give a little introduction before we read the scripture. It'll be Luke 2, 7 through 20. But I want to tell you what I'm going to be talking about today first and read it in light of that. The title of the sermon, Jim, is Christmas Paradoxes. Now, for those of you who don't know what a paradox is, or you do but you don't, a paradox is a preposition or a statement that seems to be contradictory in nature. But if you examine it closely, it is actually possible for both of those things to be true. It's a little bit different than an oxymoron. Oxymorons are kind of funny. You know, one of my favorite ones, if you were a fan of MASH, the television show, some of you young guys have no clue, but the older guys, if you knew what MASH was, one of their favorite oxymorons was Army Intelligence. That just didn't go together. You couldn't put those two together. Another one would be clearly confused. That's another one. You've heard the term deafening silence. You know, those are oxymorons. But a paradox is where you have some things that seem to be contradictory, but upon deep examination or not. For example, in this world that we live in, there are some paradoxes of how can we be the richest country probably in the world and yet the most unhappy country in the world? And we probably are. That's probably, it doesn't seem like that could be true, but that probably is very true. And how can we have we do have the greatest healthcare system in the world, and yet it seems like more people are sick nowadays than ever before. I mean, it just runs rampant, you know, sickness and disease and all. How can that be that we have both of those are happening at the same time? But if you look at it, you study, you'll see that there's reasons why both of those are true. So a paradox is a proposition or a statement that seems to be contradictory, but it's really not. And so I want to share with you some Christmas paradoxes this morning that seem contradictory, but they're absolutely true. And I hope that they'll make you reflect a little bit this morning. This is not just a sit back and oh joy, you know, sermon to make you feel good, but it's actually to make us reflect on what Christmas is about. So Luke 2, 7 through 20, let's read it, and then I'll share with you the Christmas paradoxes. It says, "And she, Mary, gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him in cloths and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. And in the same region there were shepherds, staying out in the fields and keeping watch over their flock by night. And an angel of the Lord suddenly stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terribly frightened. And an angel said to them, 'Do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy, which shall be for all the people. For today in the city of David there has been born for you a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. And this will be a sign for you. You will find the baby wrapped in cloths, lying in a manger.' And suddenly there appeared with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, 'Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace among men with whom he is pleased.' And it came about when the angels had gone away from them back into heaven, that the shepherds began saying to one another, 'Let us go straight to Bethlehem then, and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has made known to us.' And they came in haste, and they found their way to Mary and Joseph, and the baby as he lay in the manger. And when they had seen this, they made known the statement which had been told them about this child. And all who heard it wondered at the things which were told them by the shepherds. But Mary treasured up all these things, pondering them in her heart. And the shepherds went back, glorifying and praising God for all that they had heard and seen, just as it had been told them." It might be interesting today if we did a game of word association with the word Christmas. It probably means different things to different groups of people. You know, sometimes we get to thinking that what we think is what everybody thinks, but that's really not how it goes. If you are given to partying, and I said the word Christmas, you might immediately think of parties, or a hangover? I hope not. But a lot of people, that's what this time of year is about. It's about the parties that they can go to and the things that they can do. You know, I hope that's not it, but that's the way it is for many. If you are a merchant, and I say Christmas, you might think of sales. That actually is a big deal for a lot of people. I mean, there was an article many years ago by a man entitled Christmas Comes to Cambodia. A true story. And he was there during Christmas time, and he said there were these street vendors on the streets of Cambodia, and they were selling these little green tinsel Christmas trees and these ornaments and plastic Santa Clauses. And he stopped and asked one of the vendors, "Are you a Christian?" And she kind of looked shocked and said in broken English, "No, I'm a Buddhist." And he said, "Well then, why are you selling these symbols of Christianity?" And said her face lit up and she said, "Oh, I get rich like they do in America." And so if you are a merchant, it might mean sales to you. If you are a consumer, it might mean bills. Our son, Kyle, works he's a sales manager for this big furniture store. It's not the biggest one, but it's outside of Atlanta. On Black Friday, that store by itself sold $268,000 worth of furniture in one store on one day. $268,000 worth of furniture. The next day, Kyle was at work and the manager didn't come, but he sent him all these records and said, "Here, you might need these." After a day like yesterday, there's going to be a lot of buyer's remorse. And there's a lot of people, Jeannie and I were talking about this just yesterday, who literally spend so much at Christmas it takes them the rest of the year to pay it off. We actually know people like that have done things like that. So some people, you know, Christmas might mean bills. And if you're a musician, it might mean carols. Now, I don't know about you, but Christmas is one of my favorite times of the year for music. I love Christmas songs, and you can listen to them anytime, I know. But there's some that just go now. Do yourself a favor. If you've never heard David Phelps sing "Oh Holy Night," YouTube it. You've not lived. I'm not making this up until you've heard David Phelps sing "Oh Holy Night." "Mary, Did You Know?" is one of my favorite songs ever. And there's lots of people who do it good. But there's one that I especially like the way he does it. He's a contemporary Christian singer, but his name's Danny Gokey. And if you look him up, the way he does "Mary, Did You Know" is just an amazing rendition of the song. There's one I like you probably haven't heard of by Trisha Yearwood called It Wasn't His Child. And if you haven't heard that song, it's a really cool song about Joseph and what he had to do in that. So anyway, if you're a child, it means presents to most of them, if we will admit that. So if you're super pious, I mean, if you're a veteran Christian, and I say Christmas, you're going to say the birth of Christ. That's what we're supposed to say, so that's what we do. And there is a plethora of emotions that surrounds the celebration of Christmas. It is probably the most dear holiday for most people. But it can also be the most dreaded. And it is the most expensive, but it can also be the most profitable. And it is probably the most well-known, but yet probably the least truly understood of all the holidays that they are. There are a lot of, indeed, Christmas paradoxes. And so the first one I want to share with you today is this. Christmas, for many, is a time of great, great joy. But it's a time of sadness for many others. That's a fact. It could be a time of great fear, but it can also be a time to be fearless. Can you imagine the fear that must have gripped these shepherds? I want you to think about this for a minute. I don't know if you all do this, if I'm the only one, but I put myself in these guys' situations sometimes. I've never shepherded sheep. But I have, forgive me if you don't do this, I don't really care, this is the only one I got. It's my illustration. But I've sat in a deer stand in the evening, at night, when there's nothing around but me and God and nature, and the sun's going down, and it's quiet, and it's peaceful, and I'm just like, can you imagine if you're sitting there and heaven splits open? And listen, it says the glory of the Lord. Do you know what that is when the glory of the Lord, and I'm going, I'm probably going to fall out of my stand. I mean, I'm literally probably going to do some things that we. That's what I can imagine. It's just this calm, still, quiet night. Think about that for just a second. How afraid those guys must have been. As a matter of fact, look at it. Look in your scripture And it says that they were terribly frightened. You think? You think? I mean, they were literally terribly frightened. Part of that is because, watch this, I want you to listen to me. They were coming closer to God than they had ever been before, at that point in time in their lives. I know people don't preach this much anymore. It's not popular, but it's true. The most present emotion, the most logical emotion that comes to a person when they sense the true nearness of God is fear. That's the most present emotion. You remember when those disciples were out in the boat on the Sea of Galilee? And it was late at night and the storm came up and the disciples, it says they were frightened because they thought they were going to die. Remember that? But Jesus is asleep in the front of the boat, and finally he gets up and he stands up, and it says he calmed the wind and the waves, and it says they were terribly afraid. Have you noticed that? They were frightened for their lives with the storm. When Jesus revealed himself, they were like terribly afraid. Do y'all remember the story in Mark chapter 5 of the demoniac in the graveyard that nobody could control? And he broke the chain. And it says that Jesus healed him and he was saved. And the townspeople saw that. And it says they did what? They got so afraid they asked Jesus to leave. Have y'all ever, they asked him to go and leave. I mean, they were so afraid of what happened. Contrary to popular preaching today, the fear that comes when a man or a woman senses the true nearness of God is a fear like no other. It is a time for this world to fear Him. That's one of the reasons we're in the mess that we're in, is we don't have a healthy fear of God. In fact, the Bible teaches that man ought to fear God and nothing else. Now hang with me. Stay with me. Because I'm going to show you, I'm going to go ahead because I don't want any of you to grit your teeth. I'm going to show you that if you'll come to fear God, you can get where you have to fear absolutely nothing else. And it's the greatest peace that you'll ever find. We've got to understand the Bible teaches that we should fear God. It just may be that the way that so many people today, the way they approach worship with kind of this flippant, nonchalant fearlessness is an indication of how far we have actually drifted from God. That we could come into His presence and not think it's a big deal. Have y'all ever heard the old saying, familiarity breeds contempt? We need to be careful as God's people that that doesn't happen to us. It's a time to fear, but it's also a time to be unafraid. How can both of those be true? Look, fear grips this land of ours these days. People in this world live in fear every time. Not reverential awe of God, but they live in the fear of the turmoil and the uncertainty and the instability. And most of what most people do today is based out of fear. That's how most people live their lives. I read one time that a marketing expert was telling that one of the most greatest effective ways to market a product was to create an atmosphere of fear. If I can make you afraid that if you don't have this, you're not going to be as smart, as happy, as healthy, as popular. If I can make you afraid that if you don't have this, your life's not going to be good, I can get you to buy it. And so one of the greatest marketing examples of how to be successful is fear. Y'all ever, I know a lot of you don't do this, you don't know what I'm talking about, but some of you will. I am so sick of reading these Facebook posts that people send me that says if you don't send this to 20 other people on your feed, y'all get them all the time. And sometimes it's by people saying, you should know better than this. This is stupid. Why are you? For those of you who don't know, they'll get this little deal that says if you don't send this to 20 of your friends, something bad's going to happen. Or if you'll send it, I mean, no, if you love Jesus, pass this on. Stop, you know. Well, I mean, you get that stuff all the time. And so much of what people do is dictated by fear and motivated by fear. So many people in this world work and slave and build up and build up and build up and store and all because they're afraid they're going to miss out or their family's going to miss out. And 30 years goes by and they look up and their family has missed out on them. Y'all with me? That's what we do. So many people put their child in everything because they think their child's going to miss out. And their child does miss out. on childhood. You know it's okay for a kid to be born? That's how you learn to use your imagination. I'm not even being funny, I'm not even making a joke. It's okay for a child to be born. It's okay for a child not to have all this stuff to do. It's okay for a child to have to figure out on their own what to do. That's okay. But we think if we don't do what everybody else is doing, our child's going to miss out. They are. They're missing out on life. One of the greatest blessings for you and for me is to have the ability to use our imagination or to be able to be entertained without having to be entertained. That's one of the greatest blessings that we have. I thank the Lord every day for parents that let me be bored, that let me use my imagination, that let me, I don't need any help being entertained. My wife will tell you I'm pretty easily entertained on some stuff, but that's okay. That's the way it's supposed to be. But we live our lives based on a misplaced fear. Almost everyone, well, not everyone, but so many people today carry concealed weapons. Y'all know how many people, I hear people talk about it. Why? Because of the fear. I'm not getting on you for doing it. I'm just saying they do that because of the fear of what's going to happen. I'm not going to name any of y'all, but lots of friends, lots of people. There was and it's probably here too, but one of our elders in the other church where I was there in Durant, he said, I just want to show you this so you don't be surprised someday. I mean, he always carried, a gun with him, and now churches all have guys that are, y'all know that, right? I mean, that's part of their plan is to do that. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying it's based on fear. And we're afraid of what might happen and what's going to happen. But all of a sudden on this night, when heaven split open and the angels appeared, the very first thing they said was what? Do not be afraid. Now think about that for just a second. They said the very thing opposite of what they said. Do not be afraid. Don't fear. You see, watch this. What God is trying to tell all of us is this, that when we have a healthy fear of Him, then there is nothing in this world that we have to fear. Don't get mad or don't be resentful that God says fear Him. It's for your good. That if we fear Him, nothing else in the world we have to fear. Look here, just if you need biblical support, Jesus has said, don't fear man, but fear God. So don't fear man who can do that, but fear God who can do this. If we have a healthy fear of God, you have to fear nothing else in this world. True story. I'm going to tell on myself here, but I haven't ever told this story here, but it's one of my favorite stories. Lighten the mood a little bit. One of my best friends growing up, Gene will know him, nobody else in here knows him. His name was John Carrington. And John's dad was a retired fluke fighter pilot in Vietnam. I mean, he was really quite a character. I mean, that guy was something. And John and I were best friends, played ball together, stayed at each other's house, that kind of stuff. Well, John's grandparents had a house right candy corner from where Gene used to teach at Washington Irving. It burned down a few years ago. But anyway, they had a house there, and his parents and grandparents were going to be gone. And John and I were like 13 years old, 13, 14, 12, somewhere in there. And they wanted us to stay in the house that night so that somebody would be there. So John and I, by ourselves, are staying in this house. It's in the summertime. And we're in the back bedroom. And there's two beds. And you got to get the picture because it's part of the story. John's bed was right here on this wall, and the door was right here. But the door opened in towards Johnny, not out, okay? I'm over here on this wall, in this bed, and so I can see the opening of the door better. About 10 o'clock that night, he and I are in our pajamas, we're in the bed, and we hear somebody turning the door handle outside. And we're like, we're 13, 14, we both got to be cool, But after a while, we keep hearing, we're like, crap. And so we kind of like get to looking around, and then we hear the door open and go, so anyway, if you're 13, 14-year-old kids, when I grow up, every one of us had baseball bats. We carried them with us everywhere we went. So we both grabbed our baseball bats. And John's in the bed with his baseball bat. I still see it like it was yesterday. He's on his knees like this. And I'm in the bed and I got my baseball bat. And then the door handle to our bedroom starts to turn. And I will never forget this. That door starts to swing open, and John goes, ah, and he just falls over. His face dead away. I mean, just down. Like, I'd never let him live that. I mean, he literally goes, ah, and he just fell over. Well, I could see quicker than him, and it was his dad. And I have never been so glad to see his dad's face in my entire life. And the minute I saw his face, all the fear just went away. And I laughed really hard at John. Never lived that down. There's a lot of things in this world trying to get you. But when you see the face of the Father, you don't have to be afraid. None of that has to bother you. None of that has to scare you. He's there. He's going to protect you. He's going to take care of you. He's going to do what He said He's going to do. And we need to trust Him. And so if we have a healthy fear of our Father, He takes care of all that stuff that's trying to get us. And He doesn't let it happen. Make sure that you understand that we have to have that fear and we have to be afraid of nothing else. It's a time for fear. It's a time to be unafraid. It's a time for joy and it's a time for sadness. For some of us, this is the most joyful occasion of the year. And I'll admit, I'm one of those people. I love this time of year. But for others, it's not so much. And we need to respect that and understand that. You know, my experiences growing up, I tell people all the time, I can't lie. I had a great family. I don't have this bad story. Man, my parents were good. Christmas was a great time. Everything was awesome, you know. I can remember as a kid growing up, just the festive activity. My parents always did a good job of doing that. And once in a while, my grandparents would get to come in, you know, because they lived and spend Christmas, and that was awesome. And we used to have a Christmas Eve service at First Christian there in Durant, where I was a little kid growing up. That you talk about putting on. They were a big church, had a big choir. To this day, I can just see God and everything that went on, you know. And there was always presents. I remember not being able to go to sleep on Christmas Eve, you know, trying to stay in my room so I, you know, wait till Santa. I mean, all that kind of stuff. I can just remember that my Christmas was just a time of joy. I used to love to watch, I'll admit, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, that stupid, I couldn't wait for that show to come on. That was like my Christmas deal, you know, and a Christmas story and all that kind of stuff. I mean, my Christmas was absolutely like one of the most joyous times in the world. But for others, it's a time of deep sorrow. There are a lot of people who don't have that joy at Christmas. You know, you don't have to read a book on modern psychology to know that Christmas for many people is one of the saddest days of the year. It just, things have happened. They didn't have a good childhood. Stuff has happened, whatever. But you have to understand, we've lost loved ones, or we dread that time of year because it brings tough memories and depression. And so there's families who have fallen on hard times, and they feel the, you know, let me give you another illustration. I don't think we're sympathetic to enough sometimes. When I was at Durant High School, just retired this last year, I worked, you know, with FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes. So my group of kids, we always did a deal called Give a Kid Christmas. And we worked with the food closet, and we worked with the Women's Crisis Center, and we would identify kids that weren't going to get any Christmas. We would raise money, and in my kids, my high school kids, I was always so proud of them. They'd give up a Saturday night, a week before Christmas. We'd go to Walmart and we'd shop for those children. But now listen to me carefully. All my kids ever got to see was a strip of paper that said, girl, 10, sizes blank, likes blank. And I'd hand that to two young ladies, and they'd take off to Walmart, and they had X amount of money to spend, and they'd buy her Christmas. And two boys would see this, and here's why we did that: to preserve the dignity. I never let my kids give it to the families. They never got to see them. We didn't do a big article in the paper to brag. I was teaching my kids one thing, that sometimes you just do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Sometimes you don't always get credit for it. And there's a lot of families, yes, there's a lot of families that mess up and do stupid stuff, but there's a lot of families can't help where they are. You don't think that brings a pressure and hurt that they can't do for their kids what other people are doing for their families? Think about that for just a minute. There's a lot of people, this is a tough time of year. It's really hard on them. And we used to try to be sensitive to that when we did that with those kids. And so, even here, in this wonderful Christmas story told in Scripture, even here in the midst of great joy, it's also sadness. Now, I want y'all to stay with me. Because death is everywhere in this story. See, we don't talk about that, but this baby came to die. That's why he's here. We don't usually say much about that. Holman Hunt. Y'all ever seen that famous painting by Holman Hunt of the Bethlehem manger? And it's a clear night, it's a beautiful night, the stars, and there's this brilliant star in the sky, and its light reflecting through the manger forms a cross that touches heaven in the manger, depicting what's coming. That's one of the most beautiful pictures that there is. And that's why he didn't have to, I mean, why did he come in the first place? He came because we screwed everything up. He came because we messed this world up. He came because he had to die to take care of the things that we've done. And after all of that, look where we still are. There's hatred, there's bigotry, there's animosity, there's the same pride, there's the same injustices going on in this world, and all the same sins still exist. I mean, all that stuff. And even, it seems to be getting worse. And so I come to Bethlehem, and I'm saddened because it reminds me of the man that I was meant to be, but I'm not. I'm convicted of that many times at this Christmas time. You know, a guy wrote this. This is his words. I'll give him credit. His selflessness exposes my selfishness. His humility exposes my pride. His true love exposes my hatred. And his purity, my sin. It is a time for godly sorrow. It is a time for godly repentance. It can't just be a time of partying and fun and all that kind of stuff, or we miss the whole reason why Jesus came. Finally, the last one that I know y'all are all waiting on. It's a time for peace, but it's also a time for revolution. It's a time for peace, a time for revolution. Stay with me. The announcement was peace on earth, but it's been 2,000 years and there ain't no peace. It's getting worse than it ever has. Go to Syria, go to Iran, Iraq, go to Ethiopia, go to Venezuela, talk to them about peace. Go to Chicago and the slums of Chicago. Go to St. Louis, East St. Louis. Go to LA. Go to talk to those guys about peace. Were the angels wrong? Listen to me. They weren't wrong, but they were talking about a different kind of peace than what we normally think about. The angels were talking about this peace that happens in a man's or a person's heart when they finally come to know Jesus Christ. That you can have peace with God. Now, when I was at Durant, in the church there was a young boy. I didn't know him very good. He just came because a young girl came that I knew, and I taught her. He was from Australia, and he played baseball for Southeastern. And he sat under my teaching and got to hear my sermons, and we talked a little bit. And he talked about some stuff that was going on in his life and some problems. And one day, on a Sunday morning, he runs down, he goes, "I got to be baptized." And I go, "Okay, tell me what happened." He says, "Man, I was out on the golf course this week playing with my buddies," and he said, I knew I had to. And he says, "I just left them and I went over behind a tree and I prayed." And he says, "I got saved and I got to be baptized." He says, "I've never had this kind of peace and assurance in my life that I have right now." That's the kind of peace that the angel was talking about. That's the kind of peace that you can have. And that peace will put you at peace with other people when you know that true peace with Jesus Christ. Y'all remember, some of you don't remember, you haven't been here long enough, but all you old folks will. Y'all remember Charlie Mitchell? When Charlie was, I think he died at 87. He was pretty old. He was laying in a hospital bed in Medill, really sick, about to die. And I went to see him, and he's laying on a stretcher. I mean, he's in bad shape. And I went in there to pray with him, and I said, "We're in the ER." I said, "Charlie, how you doing?" He goes, "I'm good." He said, the hospital chaplain, now if you didn't know Charlie, you just don't know, he was a rough old guy, and he had this crooked grin, and he had this grin like says, "John, the hospital chaplain came by and asked me, about my life being right." He says, "I told him not me and John got that taken care of." He says, "I'm good." But here's my point. Peace in the face of death. He knew it was time. He knew. He wasn't going to, he knew. And he was fine. Charlie was good. That's the kind of peace that'll let a man lay on his bed that he's not going to probably get up off of and go, "I'm good, John. You don't have to worry about me." That's what he's talking about. And so we need to understand that it is a time for peace, but it's also a time for revelation. Please hang with me for the last couple minutes here, okay? Jesus did not come to embrace the status quo or to encourage complacency. He came to disturb you. He came to disturb you and me, us. The manger is not enough. Listen to me. Every year we come to this beautiful story, and we've got this cute little baby in a manger, and the world just goes peaceful, and we ooh, and we awe, and there's starlight, and the cattle are lowing. And then we turn away from this story, and we leave him in the manger. And it's become a child story. It's become a baby story. Everybody likes a baby. Everybody thinks babies are cute. But if he's just a baby, then Christmas is not enough. But he grew up to become a man, and he was a revolutionary. Nobody disturbed people more than Jesus did. Nobody disturbed people more than Jesus did. The babe of Bethlehem disturbs us, and he does it skillfully. He says, come follow me, deny yourself, take up your cross. You can't serve God and serve this world. And so we have adoration for the child, but there's outrage for the man. Because we don't want to be disturbed. And if all of us will admit it, we don't want to be disturbed. We want things just like they are, just like they're supposed to be. Ray Balcom says this: it's easy to believe that Jesus was the Son of God. It's hard to live like sons of God. It's easy to believe in the resurrection of Christ. It's hard to live the resurrected life above the sin and the turmoil of this world. It's easy to believe that Jesus Christ was in God reconciling the world to himself. It's hard to be reconcilers. The people that will actually bring this world together in peace and bring people together as one. We all waiting on Jesus to do it. He said, that's why I came, was to make you able to do it. It's not hard to be enthralled and enchanted by the marvelous story of Christmas, but it was never meant to end it. And so it says the shepherds went back to their place, never to be the same again. Now, I want to share this with you, and I'm done. One of my favorite Christmas stories. Y'all have read the Scrooge? Y'all read that? You know, he was this mean guy, and the ghost came, convicted him of who he was, and his life changed, and he was never the same. But something had to disturb him and make him realize that he was going the wrong way. That's just a story. Let's talk about a real one. Y'all read the story of Matthew the tax collector, who robbed and cheated and stole, and people hated his guts, and he met Jesus, and Jesus disturbed him. He said, I'm going to give back everything I've ever taken, plus some. And he ended up not only taking, but giving his life. You understand? He was a martyr, and he died for Jesus Christ. And then there's this story, and I'm done. I've shared with you about this man before. There was a man in prison at Stringtown, where my dad was a chaplain, and I would go often, named George Smith. And George was this big black man that was huge. Y'all see the picture on the movies of those guys sitting out doing weights all day long? I think that's what he did. And I'm not kidding. George was about 6 foot, probably 240, but not 1 ounce of fat. I'm talking about the biggest guy I've ever seen. I mean, huge, bald head. You just didn't mess with George. Nobody would even think about messing with George. He was 44. He had been in prison. Now think about this. They don't usually do this. Since he was 15. He'd been there. Murdered. Been there. But he was going to get out. I mean, he had got through where he was going to get out. But he was like the guy, the enforcer. You just didn't mess with George. One day, and he had told me about how bad of a character he was when he was younger. It's just bad as it gets. One day, I'm sitting in my dad's office in the prison, and they bring this new guy in. And he's literally sitting in the corner of the office, sitting there. He probably weighs 120. He's got sores all over him. Nose, you tell he's on drugs. He's just, and I don't know if y'all know anything or not like this, but this is a fact whether you like it or not. Weak guys in prison don't do well. That's just the way it is. Okay? I mean, they don't do well at all. And all these people are just looking at him. You know, they're coming in and coming out, getting stuff and all that kind of stuff. And he's back there just, because they would send it to my dad to try to, you know, my dad would try to help them get some stuff that they needed. George walks in, and he sees that guy, and I watch this huge, and I don't know, but it matters, but the guy was a white guy. And I watched George, this rough, huge, walk over, get on his hands and knees, and sit down by that man, and ask him, what do you need? And how can I help you? And what do we need to do? Somewhere along George's life, a revolutionary transformation took place. That he, think about it, now just listen to me, please bear with me. The biggest, baddest, toughest, meanest, and I'm not making this up, guy in the whole prison is the one that showed the most compassion and the most mercy and the most love and he actually did something about it. He actually picked that guy up and put his arm around that guy, which meant nobody messes with this guy. He's my friend now. Do y'all understand the significance of what I'm saying? Don't be too tired. Just hang with me a minute. Do you understand the significance of that? Now, the only thing that makes a man like George, who murdered people and who was do that, is a revolutionary change in his heart and life that only the fear of God and the love of God can cause. Now, let me ask you a question. How big a revolution is taking place in your heart? Because you can't have the peace of God until the revelation of God has disturbed you enough to make you change. Does that make sense? You can't have it. And that's what this world is waiting on, is more people like George who will go out instead of condemning these people and say, this is my freedom. And I want to help you get what you need. And y'all aren't going to mess with it. That's what this world needs. It is a time of peace, but it's a time of revolution. And God's people need to be revolutionaries that do things different than the rest of this world does. That's how we get peace on earth. And that all of us are looking for. Let's bow and close. Father, thank you that while we were weak and sinful and broken and worthless, you came and you put your arm around us. And you loved us. And you picked us up. And you cleaned us off. And you gave us your glory, your spirit, your blessing, your presence, your good, all these things for a bunch of people that don't deserve it. Father, forgive us when we have had the audacity to look over others and not do the same. Father, teach us what this season is really about. The beautiful baby is awesome. But the grown man, show us what love is really like. That's what it's all about. And I pray that we would learn to be those people in this time and this day that this world desperately needs to see. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.